I'm a video editor by trade. When I first got out of film school, finding my first real job in my industry was hard. I ended up taking an internship with a fitness DVD production company that turned into a pretty decent paying job, at least for a first job. Our office, when I started, was in Hollywood. It was a great building, and the office was on the 11th floor. It had a sweet view of the Hollywood sign, but after I had been there nearly 1 year, we began to expand, and our quaint little office no longer worked for us. The company found a place downtown, nearby the Staples Center, that was actually cheaper than the Hollywood office, and much bigger. At the time, downtown was pretty seedy. The new place was beautiful though. It was an old Art Deco building, with huge vaulted ceilings and big windows all around, and the view of the city wasn't too bad either, but the Hollywood view was better. The new office was an open floor plan, and was almost 20,000 square feet. It used to be a shop for garment making, so for our company, with less than 20 people, it was great. We used the extra space to build our own filming studio, so we could shoot our own stuff as well as do the post-production. As an editor, I had many late nights trying to finish a cut before a deadline. I would often stay in the office all night, often working until the sun came up, and sleeping on the couch in our lobby area during the workday. I did the same in my old office, and thought nothing of it. Then one night at around 8 or 9, I heard footsteps out in the hall. I assumed it was the boss, or another editor coming to get some work done, so I ignored it. A man walked in, who I had never seen before. I looked up and asked, "Can I help you?" He said he was looking for Katie. She was one of our junior producers. She was cute, funny, and had many friends. I thought it was odd that he would come after hours, but didn't get alarmed. I just said that she had gone home for the day and try back tomorrow. He shrugged and started out. He asked if I was her boyfriend as he left, and I said no. He said, "Okay," and left. After a few minutes, I got a text from Katie, unrelated, asking about the project I was working on and for an ETA. I told her and made a joke about the creeper looking for her. My phone rang. It was Katie. She asked if he was still there, and I told her he left. She told me that she knew who I was talking about, but didn't know who he was. He had been following her around when she went to Starbucks around the corner and cut back through the alley. She was concerned with how he knew her name. I told her not to stress. He was just a creep who probably eavesdropped when she told the server at Starbucks or something. I would go see if he was still in the hall and put a scare into him. She thanked me and hung up. I went out to the hall, and there he was. "Hey bro, you can't hang out here after hours. We're closed. This is private property," I told him. He responded that there was no security out front, and the door was unlocked. I told him that was just because I hadn't locked up yet, because I was busy, but I wanted to go home myself, and he needed to scram. He asked if I was really Katie's boyfriend, and I said it was none of his business, but no, I wasn't. He asked me what I did there, and I said in a smart-ass way, "We close at 5. That's what we do." He huffed and walked out. I locked the door behind him and went back to work. I locked the office doors too. A few hours later, I decided to take a nap on the couch. Remember, there was no separated room, all open floor plan, so I was asleep in essentially a warehouse-sized space with no walls or hiding spaces. I awoke to the sound of the front door knob of the office jiggling. I shot up on the couch, but held silent. The jiggling stopped, and knocking started. "Hey, is anyone still here? I can see the lights are on," a voice yelled. It was the same guy. I was mad at first, and was about to go yell at him, when I remembered I had locked him out. So that meant he had just committed a breaking and entering to get to the office door. So this was a potentially dangerous man. I started shaking with adrenaline. Quietly, I made my way to the other door at the opposite end of the office, a good 120 feet away. I stood next to it listening silently, waiting for him to break into the front entrance door. The knocking became kicking. He kicked even louder and louder, yelling at the door. "I know you've got Katie in there. I need to talk to her," he screamed. Shit, fucker is crazy, I thought, and braced myself for a fight. After a good minute or so, I heard the front door snap open. I opened the door I was at and tried to hide my movements with his, so he wouldn't know I was there. I looked down the hall and saw him walk into the office as I came out. As quickly and as quietly as I could, I closed the door and ran up the stairs to the roof, since he was at the end by the front elevator. I darted across the roof and hopped over the ledge to the fire escape. I went down it as quickly and quietly as I could. I passed in front of our big window and froze. He was in there at Jessica's desk. She was another editor like me. He was just going through her stuff. I can only assume he saw girly style decor and thought it was Katie's. He looked at me through the window. He turned and started running towards me. I bolted down to street level as I heard the window trying to open. I looked up and he was looking at me. He started laughing and shouted, "You're a nut. I'm not gonna hurt you. Come back." He then went back inside. He was taunting me. I ran down the street to an all-night gas station on Olympic and 11th and asked to use the phone, as all my stuff, including my cell phone, was still on my desk. I called the cops and told them what happened. They told me not to go back and to stay in the safety of the well-lit public gas station, and they would send a car over to check it out and talk to me when they were done. I waited for half an hour before they walked into the gas station. The officers told me that the front window to the first floor had been smashed in with a rock, and that whoever he was long gone. But the creepy thing is what he left. They said there were 2 dead cats on the roof, throats cut, and that in our office there were scratches and curse words carved into Jessica's desk, and Katie carved into it as well. After the cops took me back to the office to collect my stuff, my boss showed up. The police had notified him. He gave me a hug and asked if I was okay, and I nodded. Life in Los Angeles, right? I tried to laugh it off. The next morning, still shaken up, I went to work late. When I got there, the window was boarded up and the office door had been replaced, the old one laying on the floor in the hall. Everyone had to hear my tale and find out everything that happened to me. Katie was crying, both for herself and for me. My boss sent most people home early, except for the 4 of us, the 4 who worked at night. He said, "I didn't want to bother anyone who didn't need to know, and the fewer that know, the better. But after what happened last night, I want you to be safe if you work here late." He went to his locked drawer in his desk and opened it up to show us a .38 Magnum he bought. He gave us each a key to the drawer. He also mentioned that we had the guy on camera and that the police were on a lookout for him. I felt much safer after that. I worked there for about 5 months after that and never saw the creep again, but neither did the police. He's probably still out there roaming the streets of LA. It's a big city with lots of places to hide. This story happened to my wife and me about 4 years ago. A little background. My wife and I tried to buy a house, and that wasn't working out too well, as we had poor credit and hadn't been at our jobs very long. We got strung along for months, until we finally decided on an apartment instead of a house. Luckily, we were able to afford an apartment in a nice area for about the same as the mortgage would have been on that house, but without the homeowner's insurance and other costs that would have come with the house. We were discouraged, but looked on the bright side. We now lived in a model neighborhood where everybody looked out for everybody. So our decision to rent, as opposed to own, must have been a good one, right? The first person in the neighborhood to say anything to us was the one old lady who lived upstairs from us, who confronted my friends and I when we were moving my stuff, and mentioned that no one had lived in the apartment for quite some time, and she was elated that people were moving in. She seemed almost overly excited. I thought to myself, wow, the people who live here seem really nice. She seems a little weird, medicated, but still nice. We ended up nicknaming her, affectionately, Crazy Lady. We finished moving our stuff in and continued to talk to this woman every time we saw her. She really was a trip, always so overly excited about everything. However, the more I talked to her, the more I couldn't help but notice how it seemed like there was another woman behind all those smiles. Like a woman copying. I knew she was on medication, so I chalked it up to that, since she's not exactly the first person I've met like that. We had a concrete patio, with a bench we'd sit and smoke on when it was nice out, and the breezeway was literally right next to it, so we met numerous people from our building when they would enter or exit. We saw Crazy Lady a lot, and eventually we met her husband Randy. He was kind of tall, in his late 40s, early 50s, slightly overweight, balding, a mostly gray short beard, which you could tell was only from laziness, wore glasses, and wore the same light blue plaid shirt and sweatshorts daily. He didn't have a job due to him being on disability for PTSD. He was in the military, but this isn't where the condition came from. I'm not going into too much detail out of respect, but basically he lost someone very, very dear to him, and simply never got over it. I can relate to that, so it wasn't hard to talk to him. We started talking more and more, and despite our age difference and totally different lifestyles, we became friends fairly quickly. I eventually invited him inside to sit while we talked about science, my favorite subject, and all sorts of other things. I mentioned video games to him, but of course he stated that he had no interest in that. That was, until one day I started playing Metal Gear Solid 4, and he sat and watched. After the first few cutscenes, he commented, "You know, I don't like games, but I like this." I was ecstatic. I had always wanted to introduce an old-timer to video games, and now I had an opportunity to do just that. He started coming over every day to watch, and I would actively call or go over to his place to get him so we could hang out. And, at this point, talk about games. This is when Randy got a little too comfortable. My wife was as sociable to everyone in the neighborhood as I was, and that included Randy. She may not have had the same connection with him that I had, but she could talk with him, and was at least cordial when he was around. Randy appeared to have this odd fixation on my wife, and would often tell me how beautiful she was. And I figured, hey, we're friends, and would be like, thanks. But as he got more comfortable with us, the comments got less friendly. On one occasion I told him, "You know, you also have a beautiful wife," which was true. Despite her eccentric nature, she looked good for a 50-year-old. But his reply to this was, "Want to trade?" I laughed it off, thinking, hee, funny man, and he went back to talking about other stuff. To add a bit more insight, while maintaining respect for the details, the person Randy lost was his first wife, and she meant everything to him. She was Filipino, and he described her as the most gorgeous woman he had ever seen. My wife, as it turns out, is also Asian, though not Filipino. She's Vietnamese. Still a dark-skinned Asian woman. At this point, Randy was coming over more and more often, and it started to feel like he came over specifically when I was at work so he could talk to my wife. My wife isn't afraid of anybody, so she would talk to him alone. I worked at home for Home Shopping Network as a sales rep, so I could always turn around in my chair from my desk and see Randy sitting on the bench outside next to my wife, just talking. They would talk about the same random stuff him and I would talk about, but she showed some concern after a while, when his comments became increasingly sexual in nature. He would say things like, "You think my wife would be mad if I took you upstairs?" Or, "Does your husband know we're talking?" Or just simply, "You're so beautiful." She would laugh this off, just like I had, but knew these weren't just innocent comments anymore. At one point, Randy invited us both to eat with him, his wife, his brother, and his wife at a Chinese restaurant, knowing full well that I would be at work. I respectfully declined, while my wife decided to go, as she knew that his wife and other family members would be there. Plus, she and I love the hell out of some Chinese food. Randy insisted on riding with my wife, while his wife was left to drive by herself, which she, for some reason, agreed to. My wife asked him, "Isn't your wife going to be upset that she's driving alone?" To which he responded, "No, she's fine," never once giving an explanation as to why he didn't just ride with her. On the ride there, it was mostly silent, until he finally looked up at her and said, "I'd like to tie you up." This understandably creeped my wife out, but she couldn't do much besides ignore him and hope things would get normal at the restaurant. They didn't. When they got there, Randy sat beside my wife and across from his wife, and looked at his brother and said, in front of his own wife, mind you, "This is my new wife." Their response was to look at each other with a look of utter confusion, and his wife looked visibly upset. A far cry from the cheerful eccentric lady we met when we first moved in. When my wife got home and told me what had happened, it was clear to us that Randy was overstepping his bounds, but nothing prepared us for what our friend had in store for us next. I was working one night, and my wife was on the couch, facing the sliding door that led to the patio outside, which was mostly blocked out from the vertical blinds we had. She was in a pair of sweatpants, and had a silk spaghetti strap nightshirt on with no bra. Her hair was down, she was filing her nails, and oblivious to all. I was in between calls, and had swiveled around in my chair from the computer to stare off into space, when I noticed a blinking orange light between the two vertical blinds. It flashed over and over. I sat up in my chair and shouted, "Honey, is there someone out there?" Without even asking what I meant, she sprang to her feet and ripped open the sliding glass door, to see Randy standing there with a digital camera. All I heard from my wife was, "What the fuck are you doing?" That was it for me. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but this was my limit. I augsed out of my computer, that's how we took breaks, and ran to the sliding glass door, just in time to hear his excuse. "This camera doesn't work. I was just trying to test it to see if I could get it to work." I yelled, "So you're standing outside my porch and testing it on my wife? This is creepy, man. Get the fuck off my porch." She went inside, and I followed him up the stairs as he continued to try to explain it away. We got to his door, and I let it all out. No one was going to take secret pictures of my wife and talk to her the way he had. I said, "Look at me, dude. I'm shaking right now. This is not cool. And the raunchy comments need to stop too. Don't ever talk to my wife that way again." He tried to deny the comments, but I quickly informed him that she told me everything, and that she wasn't a liar, And if he didn't want to be sorry, he'd test that fucking camera in his apartment. I was totally shaken, and normally I'm a pretty timid guy. But just like he had gotten comfortable with me, I had gotten comfortable with him, and I let him have it. At this point, however, his demeanor changed from, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," "What the fuck are you doing at my doorstep?" I noticed this, and fell back into a more submissive state. I said, "Dude, we were friends. I miss that. I want to go back to that." His response, "I miss that too, man. And I still want to see what that snake is going to do next," talking about Metal Gear Solid 4. And at this point, I got naive. I calmed down and stopped shaking and said, "Well, I have to get back to work. I'll see you later." And I started walking down the stairs. As I was walking, he said casually, "Maybe I'll see you. Maybe I'll kill you." I stopped dead in my tracks at the base of the stairs. I was totally flipping out now. What the fuck did he mean by that? I slowly turned around to see a smirking Randy at the top of the stairs. "What the fuck did you just say?" I asked, with an understandable shake in my voice. The man did own at least 2 guns. He never showed them to me, but they were the subject of many conversations we had. He repeated himself, "Maybe I'll see you. Maybe I'll kill you." I was genuinely scared now. I realized that instead of dealing with a lonely down-on-his-luck PTSD sufferer, I might be dealing with a real freaking psychopath. I didn't want him to know I was scared though, and I marched right back up the stairs and got in his face saying, "Don't you dare threaten me." To which his response was a big sigh and an "I'm just kidding." To which my response was, "Well, don't fucking kid like that." I walked down the stairs, shaking all over again, all the while he's watching me with that smirk of his. I may have acted like I wasn't scared, but inside I was terrified. I thought he was my friend, but now he was threatening me. I ultimately lost my job because of this, because I took too much time off talking to him. But to me, it was worth it. My wife and my family are far more important than any job I hate any day of the week. And I truly think that if I hadn't stood up to him, he may have tried something. Because after secret photos through the window, what's next? Secret trips through the window? Luckily for us, the 2 of them inexplicably decided to move. I felt like the decision came out of nowhere. After being in that apartment for 10 years, and after all this crap they did to that place, they decided to move. Although, I have a feeling that it was mainly his wife's decision. We still have no clue how much of this story she knew about, but chances are she knew it all from Randy's perspective. Either way, we were relieved. I would like to say that I try not to harbor ill feelings towards Randy for what he did. He was one of 2 things, and I hope he was the former of what I said earlier. A lonely, down-on-his-luck PTSD sufferer looking for companionship. But it's quite possible he had worse things in mind. Things got calmer after they moved, and life went back to normal. But to add one more layer of creepy to this story, one last thing Randy said to me before he left was, "You know, I can see these apartments from my new place." We've since moved. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you check out the description for information on how to submit your stories. I hope you all have an awesome day, and I'll catch you in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.